I said, my name's Justin Varlick. I'm the founder and CEO for HackPack, which is basically a global network for the media industry that helps connect journalists like yourselves, editors, photographers, videographers, as well as PR members and content marketers. But I want to know a little bit more about you guys before we start. So who here is a journalist or an editor? Raise your hand, please. Okay, wow. How many of you work in marketing and PR then? Please raise your hand. Okay. Interesting what everyone else does, but I guess my third question is how many of you, and this goes along with what Margaret said, how many of you who work currently in PR and marketing have left journalism because there just wasn't any funding for those jobs and for what you're doing? Raise your hand. Okay, a few, really, okay. So one thing that we're going to start talking about, if I can figure out this. There we go. Yeah, okay. So first thing we're going to talk about, I want to start off with, is talking about a general trend in the markets. You guys understand that it's more than just 2 or 3 people, but there's this huge global trend where the news industry is not making money. I was at a conference last year in Moscow, and 7 of the head editors of major publications there all emphatically said that there was not a media crisis. It's just slowly degrading, and we will figure out some way to fix it and move beyond. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the numbers, the past 15 years in the US alone, newspaper revenues have dropped by 51%. That means that costs, aka journalists, photographers, videographers, are also cut. If you look globally, ad revenues for print media, which is newspaper and magazines, is losing its share to a lot of different other types of ad revenues, such as radio, TV. But that's not such a big problem. The problem is that the internet ad revenues, which are making it up and growing so much, they're going to, get this? The big 5. So essentially, Google, also YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all these 5, they make up 61% of global ad revenues through internet. That means that all this money is completely bypassing the news industry. Which means that they fall off, they have to drop and make a lot of cuts. And so what's that mean for us? This is kind of a map that shows publications, most in the US in the very bottom, who've completely cut their foreign bureaus. And so they do not have the ability nowadays to actually cover things such as protests in Moldova because they don't have people here. They'd have to find someone like the Citizen Journalist or a couple tools that I'll talk to you about today. McClatchy, I want to mention, they just cut all their foreign bureaus last November, and they focus mostly on DC policymakers. So it's kind of a big deal for people who are making international policy. Al Jazeera America just announced they're stopping, and they're no longer going to be around. You have Guardian, they just announced last week a 20% budget cut in everything that they do, and BBC announced £5 million budget cut just for this year in their news section. And in the future, they're going to keep cutting it more and more. So this group and number have been growing for the past 10, 15 years, and it's going to keep growing as all the ad revenues are focused on, like they were talking, the big players, Facebook and Google, and they bypass news and media, and they haven't figured out a way to make money yet. So that's bad, because in public, you and I don't receive good, nuanced information about what's going on in our world. So they don't really know why there are protests in Moldova, who are the key players doing it, who's telling the truth and who's not, which is a big problem. So, but I'm talking about tools that help us actually learn about things that are going on the ground and help the newsrooms be able to cover things globally and connecting all of you. And one of the main trends for that is mobile smartphone penetration. Someone earlier announced that there's like 80% of the world's population is supposed to have a smartphone by 2020. I don't really believe this. It's like a little bit beyond, because they're basically at the end of this year, it's supposed to be only a quarter. So, but a quarter of the entire global population is a ton of people. India alone, it's over 167 million people who own a smartphone. It's like an iPhone or an Android, which means that all these people are able to be contacted through WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook instantly. So anyone based in New York can go ahead and find anyone else and access them, get a hold of them, and ask them to help work on a project, help them take a video or a photo, just like that, for no cost, both to the local person as well as the editor back in New York, which is good. The other main trend that people see are that age isn't so much a factor. And what I mean by this is not so much that older people aren't tech savvy, but that a lot of people nowadays are just more used to because they've had more time to use social networks. For us, it's basic, obvious. However, when you go work with a lot of editors who tend to be older, they may not be the most savvy about it. However, Facebook came out in 2005, so if you were 30 in 2005, you'd be about 40, 41, and that's the majority of editors out there. So they're much more knowledgeable about Facebook, much more knowledgeable about Twitter, which came out in 2007, and they're used to using social networks to search for people, get a hold of you, and be able to actually access those things. And they trust them, which is a big deal. You'll go around to a lot of different publications, and you'll be amazed at how many editors just are completely afraid and don't use it. But it's a major change now just because time has gone by. Another factor is that we talk about globalization a lot, and one main thing is there are tons of jobs. Not just from news industry, but also content marketing, from businesses looking to move into a new market. So let's say you're a startup in Moldova. You don't want to stay in Moldova, there's a small market. You want to move also into Romania. And you also want to move it, let's say, into France. And then you also want to move into the US market. For each one of these, you need to have a localized blog. You need to be able to put out information, find out if the market's good to move into or not. And for that, you need local people. People who understand the culture, who understand what's going on, can do interviews and talk to people, get a hold of them, get to know them, and they actually pay a lot of money. For events like this, people come in and they need to find photographers to do the event. As well as, we just recently worked with this London-based clothing manufacturer, and they essentially were looking to film their entire production scale from gathering the cotton to actual end producer. And so they needed to find someone in India who could help find a field with cotton, help them film it, and be able to translate and anything else. And so there's a lot of these different types of jobs to find someone way back in some other place that just normally weren't around before. So the positive thing is you take all these factors, the loss of jobs, a lot of people looking for different opportunities, the ability to have access to people locally for little to no cost, the ability to have a lot of jobs, and the fact that editors back in New York and in London actually are much more capable of using social networks. And you have things like we just talked about with Fresco News of user-generated content, as well as what I'm going to talk about, which is more focused on professional networks. And here I'll give you a number of examples, which you can kind of figure out which works best for you. But there's a group called Story Hunter, and they're based out of New York, and they focus mostly on videography. And basically, all of these are just a network and a market where you can basically find people who are local, and people who are local can be able to get access to the people who are willing to buy, whether that be content marketers, whether that be editors, and whatnot. You have Blink, which focuses on photography, also based out of New York. A group called World Fixer, based out of London, working with fixers who do broadcast. And then you also have Paydesk, which is also based in London, working more on text and written journalism. And then us, and we focused on a little bit of everything. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about us, which is kind of an example of what a number of these do. But, I mean, I've founded the company. I believe that we do it a little bit better. I'll explain kind of why and how, and the benefits that we do, as well as how it will help you get access to those places beyond, as well as how to get the stories out from these areas themselves, working as a professional journalist. So who are we? We are a community of about 3,100 journalists, photographers, videographers, fixers, and editors around the world on over 120 countries, and bringing on more people every day is kind of where we are, where we have people. And basically the idea is that, hey, let's bring as many job opportunities and many things for you to be able to get paid from all in one spot. You fill out a profile, put your languages that you know, you put where you're located, as well as what your specific interests are, and then people can be able to, well, then you receive direct emails based upon things that people put up, whether it be a freelance opportunity, whether that be an event, a grant, or a fellowship. You yourselves can put up story ideas and editors receive them, so instead of having to scan all these many technologies which we've seen so far, you can basically just wait and you'll receive story ideas from local journalists who know what's going on and can give you information based upon your specific interests. And that's great for things that aren't urgent, but breaking news is really the biggest part of the news industry. And so you have to be able to search and be able to find people immediately if you're running late, if you lost your cameraman, you need a new person there. if you're looking to hire someone to cover the protests last minute, things are breaking. So we also provide a way to search, identify exactly who's there based upon, like I said, the interest, language, location, skills, etc. And basically you can generally see a profile, yeah, woohoo, it's a general like resume. You see a portfolio, they're not really that important. Most editors are really concerned about seeing what does someone's copy look like before the edit. What am I going to have to deal with? How much editing am I going to have to redo? Does this person actually get things in on time? Do they meet deadlines? And so we provide a colleague feedback, so this way editors can give journalists feedback, but also journalists give editors feedback to hold them accountable. And this way you can teach each other what's most important. So a journalist would say, hey, did the editor pay? Did the editor care for your general well-being? If they sent you to a conflict zone, such as in Ukraine, are they checking in every day? Or they just send you out there and say, okay, send me in stories when it's nice. And that's it. And so it's something that's very important to help bring up the level of professionalism within journalism, as well as incentivize them to take care of each other's needs. So here's a group of people that we're currently working with. There's a lot of different needs. We were just working with Al Jazeera, where essentially they had for themselves, in Berlin, they had an interview with refugees. They had a camera crew already there, but they didn't have someone to interview the refugees themselves. They had to find someone who's a journalist with journalist capabilities, professionalism, and who spoke Arabic. And so they used us to basically find someone on the spot to be able to do that. In France, they're looking for a videographer because all their people were busy. BBC's prepping for the World Cup in Russia, so they need to find who are in all of these different towns in the middle of Russia when they've cut most of their entire network budget, so that they can reach out to them in 2 years' time and be able to be doing stories in advance, be able to take photos. If there are people busy, they'll have videographers, maybe people who can go ahead and write for them. And yeah, and otherwise, people who are looking, just like Vice, looking for story ideas. So they say, hey, we need stories about the black market from all over the world. And then journalists go ahead and write and say, hey, here's the one story about the black market that's going on in Nepal. Here's one story about gold in Venezuela. Here's one story about the black market of organs and being able to sell different people's organs in Kosovo from the 90s, which is an interesting story that they put up. And so it makes it a lot easier, and it's a different step. It's similar to the user-generated content which we're just hearing about, but it's a step away from it, focusing on the professional realm, saying that, hey, how can we actually manage to prevent this propaganda, or how can we actually understand that that information has been vouched for and fact-checked? Because first you use a professional journalism, second you rate them. If you have to do apologies after the story comes out that the information was not wrong, then other people and other members will realize, oh, hey, I don't want to work with that journalist. And if they're able to actually perform well in the field. Besides that, we're also working a lot with companies, bringing them in, because like I said, the main difference for us is that if you just work as a market between journalists and editors, both don't have money. So you're not going to be around very long. Either you're going to be working with grants or you're going to be sitting down somewhere. So what we do is we focus on companies, PR agencies, and content marketers who also, one, have jobs, freelance opportunities for photographers, videographers, and journalists. Business intelligence, who are looking for people in the field to help them identify what's the market like, should we be moving in with our clients or not. NGOs, tons of NGOs want to be doing research, understanding long-term reports about what's going on in that specific area, both with the World Health Organization as well as with the World Bank. They do many, many, many things like this, and they constantly need people to assist with that. And so we help them bring jobs, be contacted with you, and get a hold of each other. As well as then put up research and press releases so that you guys can be able to find what other research is going on, what's interesting things, what's most useful for me. And that's a little bit about us in order to make sure that we ourselves are helping to fill this coverage gap that we've seen grown so much more.